as well, and the Congressman joins us. Congressman Cantor, thank you.
Good to be here.
What I'm curious to know, because you and I spoke here last year, is what you have learned about the way that Europeans and people from other nations view the U.S. right now.
Well, I think, first of all, you've got to say that, our delegation is here really focused on talking with some, not only some foreign leaders, but world leaders who are trying desperately to see the best way for a better future. And obviously at home, we've got some concerns with the lack of job growth. We're trying to learn from others to see the best way forward with education, opportunity, and the rest. I will say that probably most of our meetings with foreign leaders have reflected a real desire to see a strong America, especially those in the Middle East. I've met with the Prime Minister of Israel. I met with the Prime Minister of Egypt, with the Tunisians. I met with representatives from the Ukraine. I think clearly American leadership is so important, and with a strong America actually becomes a stronger economy at home, and obviously that is what we all want.
So when Rouhani gave basically a conciliatory speech, and he's basically trying to win over foreign investors to do business, do you believe it? Is it the right time?
Absolutely not. I think there has been a veneer pasted on Iran throughout all the buzz here. I think it is absolutely wrong. Iran has done nothing for us to trust it. It is a repeated offender of violating international law. We ought to stand firm with our allies in that region that say don't trust these folks.
Did you throw a snowball at him?
I did not. But I think that, certainly many from America that are here are very distrustful of what's going on.
But hold on, wait. They're distrustful there. How much are they trusting you? How much are they trusting that we're not walking into another debt crisis? Jack Lew just wrote a letter that said February 7th, we're running out of money.
Well, I think that what we have experienced over the last year in the House has demonstrated that there just is not a meeting of the minds on how to properly deal with the deficit. And I think that the Republicans, we in the House, have certainly said, look, you've got to deal with the entitlement situation. Unfortunately, we've not had a Democrat or White House that's been willing to go along with us. And there is a lot of frustration there. However, we understand that just as what happened during the shutdown, if the Secretary of the Treasury says a date certain by which you go beyond the period where there's no risk, I don't think that anyone or most would say, let's go and take a risk that is absolutely unknown by not making sure that we resolve the debt crisis or the debt ceiling.
Okay, let me just understand this, because people need to know, quite honestly, Congressman. If I understood you correctly, there will not be, you don't believe that Congress, that the House or the Senate is going to test the debt ceiling again?
There is no testing of anything, and no one has ever tried to test
what about that? Okay, well, but it has been talked about in principle, let's put it that way.
Eric, I disagree. I disagree with that.
I'm not interested in an argument at all. What I do want to know is whether it's going to take anything in the way of negotiation to bring both sides together and make sure that the debt ceiling isn't an issue and doesn't weaken America in the eyes of foreign leaders. People have talked about Keystone, for example. They've talked about relaxing EPA requirements. They've talked about waiving some of the provisions of Obamacare. Are those things on the table, or is it well, I'll just ask you, are they on the table, and what's at the top of the list?
Certainly, we ought to have a White House willing to sit down and say, you're right, we can't keep incurring this debt without solving the problem. I mean, what you hear here, and I know last year here, was, can America get its fiscal situation straight? Well, we know that we've got to do something about the fiscal situation. The demographics and the health care costs are such, you got to change the structure of the entitlements. So certainly the administration says, you know what?
But is it realistic to do that?
With them, with the administration, they've demonstrated they don't want to do it. So
then what's the real game plan?
To your point, I think all of us want to grow the economy. We grow the economy. That means more jobs, upward mobility. There are things that we have in common with the president. For instance, skills. He's talked a lot about the need to close the opportunity gap. We passed the Skills Act. That's something that, frankly, he should embrace. There are plenty of things that we can work on together. Regulatory relief. All we're asking for is some cost-benefit analysis in the way that Washington promulgates regulations. That is a good thing for growth.
So what would it take? In other words, what could they give to make you feel good enough about taking a deal to your membership and saying this is something that we need to pass?
Well, I mean, again, barring some extraordinary proffer, which they would say, you know, you're right, we got to do something about these entitlements, which I just don't think they're going to do. Let's all work to see how we can grow. You mentioned Keystone. You mentioned, you know, regulatory reform. Anything that is holding back our economic growth, which tamps down upward mobility, would be something I think very favorable.
Is there one of those things that you would prefer over another?
I don't want to negotiate any of this. I think that our leadership, our speaker, and I and the rest of the team are very interested in working in a positive way to grow our economy. And for too long, I think there's been an acceptance of the lackluster growth and the new norm, if you will, that I don't want to accept in lack of employment growth.
People are frustrated with Washington. I'm sure you're frustrated as well. You mentioned education. You talk about it a lot. After spending a few days in Davos, do you think private citizens can be more impactful? If you want to spend to help education, you have to raise taxes. You have to increase the amount of money that you're spending. When you see Mark Zuckerberg give hundreds of millions of dollars like so many others here, do you think they can do more for education in our country?
So what I've been doing over the last year is almost every month visiting programs of charter schools, public charter schools, and other school choice programs around the country, including in my own district of Richmond, Virginia. And what I've seen is school choice is the way out of this cycle of poverty for so many who are stuck in failing schools. And honestly, you look at some of the systems that are spending more money than others, and they have some of the worst results. Money is not the only answer here. We've got to reject the status quo. We've got to raise the expectations, and we've got to say, hey, listen, you can't keep sustaining schools that don't respond to parents' and kids' needs when it comes to quality education.
Congressman, have you spoken to anybody here about immigration? And if so, what have foreign leaders told you?
Well, I don't think that many of the foreign leaders have asked us about immigration.
No, I'm curious, but you talk about a strong America, right? A strong America needs a deal at some point on immigration.
Well, I think what you're going to see is we Republicans believe in fixing the system, and we are going to be taking our retreat of Republican members of Congress in another week or so, and we're going to be discussing principles. And to see if there is some consensus. Now, I've always said this. I've always said any kind of immigration reform has got to be first the implementation of law at the border, the implementation of our laws in the interior. I've also been a huge advocate for our KIDS Act, which says basically if you've got kids brought to our country by their parents, unbeknownst to them in many instances, how in the world can you turn your back on them? At least we ought to be able to start there and then build. But again, it has a lot to do with, frankly, the fact that the laws have not been implemented thus far, and so there's a distrust that we're going to just try and do something and it'll repeat itself.
Do you believe that there is room in the Republican Party, particularly among House Republicans, for a path to citizenship?
I believe that, for instance, I believe in our KIDS Act. I am for a path to citizenship for our kids.
For children.
For our kids.
How about illegal immigrants who've been in the country for some years and who can demonstrably be shown to have made a contribution to the country?
All I can say is this, Eric, is there has to be a little higher bar for citizenship. The reason why I think the kids case is so compelling is our country has never said that we're going to hold kids liable for the misdeeds or illegal acts of their parents.
And shouldn't, right?
Right, and should not. But if you have an instance where there was a violation of the law, I think the standard is higher there. But
would you break apart kids from their parents?
No, but listen, you asked for citizenship. I'm not saying, so we've got a lot of work to do. If we just start, though, let's start to see where we can make some progress. And I think that that's really where Washington needs to go. We've got divided government, for a reason. I think that the country and the public has seen, when you look at Obamacare, when you look at Dodd-Frank, when you look at the kind of regulatory environment we have, and we hear a lot about that here, too. When businesses look at America and we want to attract investment, right now we're not not the friendliest environment. And so we're trying to make that a better place, trying really to see an America that works again. We know we can do it.
Business leaders are also interested in talking to you for another reason. John Boehner told Jay Leno he doesn't want to run for president. Unclear if Chris Christie will have that road. Do you want to?
No.
Definitely not?
No.
Do you want to be Speaker?
No, listen, I am very focused on the privilege that I've got in
of
terms
being on market.